All right, now on to the retopology of the human body. Remember to always discuss this step and collaborate with your rigging team. This is super, super important. Remember that you're the first in line of a long production pipeline, and what you do here will affect everyone down the line. So be sure to be aware of what their needs are so the project can go as smoothly as possible. All right, so I'm just using my decimated mesh from ZBrush, and I'm just going to use a modeling toolkit with symmetry on to start blocking in my topology. And I know that, just think about it like dividing up the body into primitives. So the torso is a primitive, it's a cylinder. The breast is a sphere. The arms are cylinders, the legs are cylinders, the neck is a cylinder. And you just kind of build up those forms based on that. Now, the more technical things that are important to think about are where these cylinders deform and how your topology should flow so that animation and rigging are working the way they should. So what I usually do is I'll build out cylinders on each element and then just kind of treat it like a puzzle and connect all the dots, basically. I'm also trying my best to make sure to keep even numbers in mind when I'm making my cylinders. That way, things are just going to make more sense and divide up better. So I'm making a little elbow area, and I'm also following the edge flow of the deltoid, because that's a major area to keep in mind for character sculpting or character modeling. There's just a few key areas that you really need to pay attention to so that deformation works as best as possible. So I'm just continuing up, and I'm going all around the model, just, kind of like a big puzzle. I'm dividing this area right here, just the way the pectoral muscle and the deltoid kind of bend, so I can put as many edge loops as I need to in that area so it deforms well. All right, I'm just rebuilding this arm area because I think I had recovered from a crash. Always remember to save, guys. You can never save too often. So as I connect to, I'll use the smooth feature in the modeling toolkit to just even out my faces and edges. So I'm just connecting areas, making sure that, things are lining up. If I get to an area that I haven't been able to solve yet, I'll just leave it for a little bit later and then come back. So I'm making sure to follow the butt line there. It's an area of deformation, and then also this this deltoid and armpit area. I want to make sure there's enough resolution in there so that the whole arm can bend correctly. I would say topology is it's something that you learn by doing and kind of seeing what examples worked previously and starting with that first and then seeing what you can do to improve upon it. I think that's the best way to approach it. So there's a few resources. You can even use my topology as a guide to start with. And if you have, different needs, if your rigging department, say, needs something else, then just adjust from there. But this topology that I'm showing you now will give you a pretty good start. All right, I still haven't solved that one little area, but I'm just smoothing out the rest. Making sure the bottom of my leg is nice and smooth. All right, I'm just jumping around like crazy because I'll kind of get bored of one area and then move on to the next part. And what's great about the modeling toolkit is if one part isn't quite working, you can always delete those faces and just rebuild. It's really, really, really easy to do that. So I kind of want these faces to bridge to the neck. So I'm going to just work on that puzzle for a little bit. Smooth it out. Just kind of reroute things to work the way I want them to. And it just takes a bit of trial and error. Like I said, it's like a puzzle. So I'm just going to move on to the toes. And I kind of already know how I want my toe topology to work. Just because I've made so many toes and fingers. So I just know that my toe needs to connect to a nice foot mesh. And I'm just thinking about it like how I would box model it. Just start as simple and as planar as possible. Cool. So I'm just smoothing up the leg, making sure the edge flow follows the butt. Let me divide up the belly button just a little bit, leave some topology for that area. All right, now I'm going to build the bottom of the foot. And I'm basically using my knowledge of what a smooth sphere or a smooth cube looks like to build the bottom topology of the foot. All right, now I'm just gonna, model the more normal way to get my toe to work. Just because I don't want to have to model on the toe mesh because it's so close together with the other toes. I know it's going to snap in really weird ways. So I'm just going to kind of model the toes like you would just to box model them regularly. And now you have this nice toe mesh that you can duplicate to the other toes. And I just kind of like size them up to kind of match the proportions and width and length of the toes that I have sculpted. And I'll just go through and duplicate after making some simple adjustments. And just adjust each toe according to my decimated scan. I call it my scan, but it's really just my sculpture that's been decimated. So now I have all my toes, and then I can just start joining them the way I want them to meet each other. And I'm not going to snap the toes right now. I'm going to just leave them as is because I don't want the meshes to get messy. So I'm just extruding and making sure that each toe kind of meets up with the next toe's outer ring topology. And then from there I can extrude to the girth and the meat of the foot. There we go. So now I know, I'll go back to that, but now I know how many edges I need my foot to meet up to my toes. And now I'm going to do something similar for the fingers. I just probably want a lot more care in the fingers because I want a lot of control and dexterity. The fingers are super important to get right. They're one of the most expressive parts of the body, so you got to make sure that The topology is really nice for that, for animation and deformation and stuff. So I'm just making one nice finger mesh. Make sure I have some divisions at each knuckle. And then I can do the same thing where I duplicate them. And this is the same thing I did with the toes. Only now I am actually going to snap them to the mesh, because my fingers are spread far enough apart so that I'm able to snap that mesh and there's no problem. So I've combined them now, and I'm just using quad draw to snap everything to the model underneath. And sometimes I'll use soft select, and then if you click on it, it's just going to snap everything within that influence gradient. And then I can just smooth it on out and make sure it lines up with my knuckles. All right, cool. I'm just joining the topology the same way I did the toes. And now all these meet up to the main part of the hand. Oops, let me just fix that area real quick. Sometimes if your snapping tolerance is too high, you'll accidentally snap edges that you don't mean to. All right, now I'm just building up some knuckle topology. And I've just made so many hands that I kind of know how this goes, but definitely study some good hand topology. This is a good start. So, you know, if you start with something like this, it'll be nice and even. This is also the cleanest way I've made hands. Everything is, you know, divided into eight divisions on each finger, and it's really easy to subdivide and to connect to different parts of your model when you have only eight faces to deal with. 8's also just the best possible number to do that, to use for divisions. So I usually try to keep it at 4 or 8 or 12 or 16 when I'm doing topology. So now I'm just making, just meeting my hand up to my wrist. I already know there's going to be too many finger edges to meet up to the wrist for it to make sense. If I had it go all the way up the arm, there would be way too many edge loops going around the arm. All right, so now I'm going to connect the toes to the main part of the foot. So I'm just trying to make sure that the seam that I'm going to place for UVs is going around perfectly around the middle of each toe and then around the heel. So that's what I'm trying to do here, making sure that that same edge is going to flow all the way to the next toe, so I can just double click it and it divides the foot completely in half. Or from top to bottom, I mean. Sometimes it takes some rerouting to get it to be the way you want. Cool, so I'm just making sure that that connects correctly. All right, cool. There we go, much better. So now I can meet the bottom of my foot to the bottom of my toes, keeping that seam that I want in mind. And if you need to, you can add some extra edge loops underneath and, you know, just get everything to line up the way you want. All right, I'm trying to do the math and like add up all of the faces appropriately. Again, there's more puzzle solving to be done, so I'm just kind of evening out the rest of the foot and then coming back to solve my puzzle. There we go. All right, now the same thing with the bottom of the leg to the foot. So now I'm going to try to even out that stuff a little bit. But first, let me solve this arm area. And I'm just trying to reroute some of these edge loops. And you can do that without having the modeling toolkit on. All right, now I'm just smoothing out some areas and relaxing a bit. Okay, now for the face, I always start out with, making a series of edges around the eyeball. And you're always going to want to have the same number of faces on top as you do on the bottom. And then I usually have a corner in each eye so that the topology can close around it. And the same goes with the mouth. So this area right here is really important to connect. And that's just because that's how your face will deform to make a smile. So it's always good to keep that topology in there. The nose is just standard box modeling topology. It doesn't really deform too much except on the top. And now I'm just making sure that there's enough resolution around the mouth so it can deform correctly. And I'm starting very, very low res right now. And I can build up resolution later as I go. So I'm just trying to build the base of the skull, at least how I would do it as a box model first, and then I can reroute edges and faces. So I'm just making sure all this stuff makes sense. I'm going to center it to the middle axis. And then just build out the base of the skull. Try to keep that nice and even, and also try to keep that that loop of edges through the center of the body. I'm trying to keep aware of that. And now I have that connected to the neck. And I'm trying to solve where the chin is going to deform. Going to add some lip topology. And as I add edge loops on the top of the eye lid, for example, I try to match the number on the bottom as well. And that's another argument for keeping things low res. It's just easier to change once you get started. And now I'm just continuing to solve different parts of the face using the same techniques. All right, now I'm just making sure that there's an even amount on top and bottom, and that I'm lining it up based on the eyelid shape. You'll have to do a little bit of modeling after you're done with this step, and that's just to make sure that the eyelid has enough resolution to go up into the eye socket. All right, now I'm just trying to quickly block in ear topology. This part doesn't really deform, so I don't need to be super worried about it, but I'd like to have the forms at least follow what I've sculpted. So I'm just making sure to model everything like I would as a box model. Just making sure the edge flows are working with how the ear kind of curls around. Just adding topology for that shape on the outside of the ear. And then what you can do is to solve for a few of the areas. of the ear topology. You can hide a bit of the topology inside the inner ear canal, and that should be fine. I'm just building the outside to connect. I'll travel all around an area when I'm working on it, just to keep the puzzle solving going. I don't want to get stuck in an area, so I just kind of move on to the next thing if I can't figure it out at first. So just adding topology in that area and connecting my ear to the rest of the head. All right, now I'm going to center all my center lines, snap them to the center axis. And I'm just going to add enough edge loops to make sure that the ears can connect to the rest of the head. And sometimes you'll need to do some modeling outside of Modeling Toolkit. At least that's how I usually approach it. All right, I'm just able to bridge it since I've matched the number of verts on the outside is to the inside. And I'm trying to line up my neck on my face topology to the rest, but I might go back and solve for that later. Now I'm just smoothing out some areas. Making sure my lines are following the form and also following where it's going to ultimately deform on the body. And now I'm going to connect the foot to the ankle and do the same thing for the hand, the wrist and the hand. And I usually just match the number and try my best to keep the number working. And then you can bridge them both. So I know there's too many on the hand, so I'm just trying to terminate some detail so it'll line up better. There we go. All right, I think I add some more edge loops on the arm. And then bridge. And now I can attach the neck to the rest of the head. I just need to make sure I have the right number on this area as well. All right, just double checking that everything lines up. Okay, great. Just trying to make things as even as possible. Now I can bridge those. Awesome. So now I've mirrored everything, so I can start to use symmetry and soft select to really smooth out the whole body. So I'm just relaxing everything and making sure that my polygons are very even. I'm also trying my best to make sure that like brow lines, nasal labia fold lines, and everything line up based on my sculpture. Just getting my hand smoothed out. Making sure there's enough topology in the upper part of my leg. All right, awesome. Now what I'm going to do is make eye and mouth sacs. So in the mouth sac, what I did was I just counted the number of edge loops around my lips, and I made a sphere with the same amount and just kind of made a little sock to join up to the mouth. And I'll do something similar. With the nostrils, it's a little bit easier because there's only about eight spans in there, so I can easily just make the cap for 8. But if it's a more complicated number, like 22, then I'll usually just do the sphere method. All right, you're going to want to make sure that you have that shelf on your eyelid. And then I'm going to do that same thing. So I'm going to place an eyeball. And I'm going to want my skin mesh to wrap around an eyeball shape. So I'm just adding some extra topology for my eyelids so that the lid itself can roll up into the fat above the eye. And what I'll do is I will make a sphere with the right number of divisions based on my count. And then I'll square off the end and then bridge it to the rest of the eye. And then I'll just snap it to the eyeball. And that way it'll fit perfectly around the eyeball shape. So now I'm just smoothing that area. And now I'm inserting the caruncle, which is the tear duct. It's just this little shape. You can see it in your photo reference. I usually keep it separate because of material assignments during shading. All right, now I'm just using a symmetrical artisan tool to sculpt in some thickness in the lips. Everything's looking pretty good.